Morena, everybody, and welcome to the Whoa. Can we get rid of that echo? Morena, that's better. Thank you. So, welcome to the council meeting. No, I've still got it. Does that stop it? No.
Should we try another one? No.
Has that fixed it? No. Morena? That's better. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the council meeting of Monday, the 15th of November 2021. In terms of health and safety, if the alarm sounds, please make your way to the nearest emergency exit, which is down the stairs next to the lift. Our assembly point is the car park at the rear of the building, and we'll wait there for the all clear to re-enter. Mobility impaired people, please wait in the lift lobby as the designated place of safety, and the fire service will be notified. Please don't use the lifts during an emergency evacuation. Be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and the video will be publicly available on YouTube. If everyone can remember to, members speak clearly into your microphones and one speaker at a time, and if everyone can turn their mobile phones off or onto silent. Thank you. Carlo, can you please open with a karakia for us?
Morena tātou, kei te mihi atu ki a koutou, ngā tamariki o tūtara wānanga, kua tae mai ki te tautoko te kaupapa o tēnei rā, tēnei te mihi atu ki a koutou. O te rā ki a tātou katoa, te pai te kiti a koutou, kia inoi tātou. He pauhihiri, he paurarama, he pau te whakaaro, he pau te aroha, he pau e here nei a tātou katoa, tūturu whakamaua, kia tīna, haumi e, hui e, tāiki e.
Kia ora, thank you, Carlo. So yes, special welcome. We've got some special guests here this morning. We'll get to you a little bit in a minute, but we've got a couple of things to do first. One is a very pleasurable opportunity for a staff member. So could I ask Fraser Smith to come forward? I'll just use my microphone. So Fraser's worked in TCC Finance for 25 years, but he's actually had a fair few different roles during that time. Where's he coming? Round here. Started as a financial accountant, and then had finance manager for the team, ensuring TCC delivered an annual report and the long-term plan and budgets. He was well prepared for this role, having come from across the tracks as an auditor with what was then Pete Marwick, that's going back a long way now known as KPMG, and before that a fellow university colleague of Christine Jones. Fraser showed his talents for modelling, and that's spreadsheet modelling, just to make it clear.
I thought that would have been obvious.
And strategic thinking, and has played a crucial role in the development of TCC's growth funding arrangements through development contributions. Fraser undertook the modelling of areas including Bethlehem through to Tutumu. Fraser's spreadsheets are famous, and many staff can remember the day he printed them and took up the entire wall of a meeting room with his DC calcs for the next long-term plan. We should have done that this year, actually. It might have been a bit more helpful.
Things are beauty.
He has developed models for depreciation reserves, development contributions, and most recently our new curbside waste collection service, which have helped councils understand complex choices and make sound decisions. Accompanying his very clever financial brain, Fraser is also a respected thespian, playing roles at 16th Avenue Theatre, including as Mr. Martini in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. The comms team very quickly recognised his performance talent. We haven't seen the video yet, but there's a film clip of Fizz Dog, and he's also used his talent to deliver some successful presentations to elected members of depreciation accounting and options for BVL as a CCO. We haven't seen those.
No.
I feel a bit cheated.
There was also a memorable one where I think two Ronnies were ended up without trousers. So.
Oh, right. Oh, goodness. Okay, right. We got children present. He attributed his experience in council as really helping him to get inside the character of Mr. Martini, who lived in a world of delusion and hallucination at the Lucia Asylum. I don't know quite how to take that. After 25 years at council, Fraser continues to be the brains behind many of the development contribution calculations and works tirelessly with the finance and strategy teams to come up with ways to deal with our growth funding and financing issues. And of course, he remains famous across council as the only employee that can walk from one side of the CBD to the other whilst reading a book. Well done, and thank you so much for 25 years of great service to the people of Tauranga. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And now there's a video that we're going to show that, all of that nice thing
Goes away.
goes away.
Well, okay. Thank you. And I'll think of what we will
There is an envelope. I was going to give him the envelope after I'd seen the video, but there we are.
Okay, thank you very much.
So we'll have a look at the video.
Want to see something cool? I'm Fraser, Fizz Dog. I'm taking you behind the scenes. Tauranga City Council. 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 Tauranga City
And they're all controlled. And they're all controlled. And they're all controlled. And they're all controlled. Fizz Dog. Fizz Dog. Fizz Dog. Fizz Dog.
Hey guys! Hey guys! Hey guys! Hey guys! Hey guys! Hey guys! Hey guys!
There you go.
I guess I'd just like to say, thank you very much for putting up with me for 25 years. It's been quite a journey, and it's been a real privilege to work in both a finance team and a council where I guess it's the ability to, for a person of sort of, I guess, in a bit of an eclectic brain, to be able to learn about, just to learn enough to be dangerous about such a wide range of topics has just been really great, and even to be useful in a couple of them. It's a great place to work. There's lots of really smart, really intelligent people that are working here, really dedicated to the community, and it's just been really cool to be part of that. So thank you very much.
Right, we'll have to have a look at that video. We'll have to have a look at that video. We'll have to have a look at that video. We'll have to have a look at that video. We'll have to have a look at that video. We'll have to have a look at that video. We'll have to have a look at that video. Is that better? Yep, we fixed it. Okay, let's move on. Apologies, we have an apology from Bill Wosley. Would someone like to move, Shad and Stephen second, that we accept the apologies? All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. We have no one booked for the public forum. We have no late items. We have no confidential business to be transferred into the open, and we have no change to the order of business. That brings us to the confirmation of the minutes of the council meeting held on the 26th of October 2021. Does anyone have any corrections to the minutes? No? You're moving them, Stephen? Thank you. Shad seconding them. Any further discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against? Thank you. Any conflicts of interest? None. No deputations, presentations or petitions. No recommendations from other committees. That brings us to the first item of business, which is the proposed dual naming for Yatton Park, and I believe we have some people who are going to come and talk to us about that. Kia ora tātou. So if you come up to the table here, and Coral will come and show you how to turn the microphones on.
Kia ora koutou, ko mā tātou tōku waka, ko maua tōku maunga, ko tauranga tōku moana, ko rangiwā tōku marae, ko Ngātirangi tōku iwi, ko tauwhao tingare te hapu.
Ko mā tātua te waka, ko maua o te mauna, ko whareroa te marae, ko tauranga te moana, ko Ngātirangi te iwi, ko Nai Tukairani te hapu. Kia ora, my name is Kanarati and this is Kororia. We are here representing on behalf of Mayorvale and Nairopu. Nairopu is a group of 12 tamariki who work on projects to extend our learning. Last year, we presented a proposal for dual signage at Yatton Park, which is our local park. The reason we felt and still feel that dual signage is important is that it is a spiritual place in Tauranga. We feel that adding in the name Yatton Park is more important than changing it completely.
Through this project, we have learned how to research, found out who to contact and how the proposal process works. We have communicated with different people by email, phone, and even set up meetings in person. We also presented our proposal to the policy committee, and thanks to Matua Nick, we are back here today. We'd like to thank all those who have helped with our project, especially Matua Nick, who has guided us through the process. We'd also like to thank the commissioners for having us here today. Ngā mihi.
Thank you very much. We're absolutely thrilled to have you with us today, and what a lot of work you've put into this. So we have a proposal then. The recommendation is to receive the report, which is proposed dual naming for Yatton Park, and approve the name Tutarawānanga to be added to Yatton Park as a dual name. The full reserve name will be Tutarawānanga Yatton Park. You happy with that? Yep. Good. I see we have someone. Nick, did you want to say anything?
We don't need to say much more than you've heard from the tamariki already, other than it's been a pleasure working with them for the past year or so, as well as the mana whenua hapu representatives that have provided some really valuable insight and background to the culture and history of the site and Yatton Park especially. So yeah, we're looking forward to hearing the decision, and if you have any questions, feel free.
So the only question I have, Nick, is I see that we're going to add to the reserve signage. So my question is, are you going to involve the students, or are the students going to be involved in designing some of that signing and some of the messages that are placed in the park to explain the history?
Yes. Yep. The students actually, in their initial proposal to former councillors, mocked up a draft sign with the name on there, so that they've already got ahead of the game on that one. So we'll be initially updating that kind of standard reserve signage as quickly as possible, should you approve it today, and then working with the school and tangata whenua on any additional recognition or signage elements they want to see in the park. There are some interpretive boards in the park that talk about the Māori and European history of the area, and so we'll be looking at what we can add to that or do differently, and absolutely everyone involved to date will be involved in that process.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Shad?
Tuatahi ka tuku mihi ki ngā tamariki, koutou I tai atina nā mai, ki roto ki tēnei whare, nō re tēnā kōrua, tēnā koutou katoa. Just want to acknowledge the presentation that the tamariki made, and I think I have met them before, because and I think Jan Taneri mentioned it to me. I think it might have been in the first month or so that we were in place and talked about the proposal to rename the park. I'm really supportive of the initiative, and yeah, I suppose I do have a couple of questions, and the kids might be able to help me answer them. Is in our report, Nick's done a great job of explaining the meaning behind Tutarawānanga, which was an area of learning and education. But I was curious about the name of Yatton. Can you provide some light on where Yatton came from, the name Yatton?
We done some research last year, so we found out Merriman family who, yes please.
I'll come and help now. We did do some research last year, and we looked at a memoir that Trish McBride had written, and we found out that the Merriman family, and I think Yatton Park was something to do with one of the old homesteads, and that was the local name, and they sort of had that area, and then over time it's sort of been developed and everything like that. So Merriman is where the school was named from, with Maryvale, and we've actually taken the name Tutarawānanga, so we affectionately know our school as Tutarawānanga, first place of learning. So that's part of why we wanted the name as well.
Thank you.
Probably just briefly add to that as well. The name Yatton was believed to come from the first owner of the homestead there, John Chadwick, came from Yatton in the southwest of England and named the area Yatton. So it's not confirmed, but believed that he just named it after his hometown.
Great, thank you. I think it's important that we recognise the history of the area and not lose sight of that name in the process. So just want to recognise both names and the importance of where those names came from. I do have one question. This is for Nick. In your report, Nick, and in the policy itself, I didn't get a sense of whether there was a need to align or whether there was a requirement to talk or engage with the Geographic Board. Are you able to provide some guidance on that, whether we do?
And not for this process, so that I believe is for certain official names, so it doesn't apply to reserve names where those the administering body for those reserves is a local council.
Stephen, do you have any questions? No? All right. You're happy to move the recommendations? Shad's happy to second. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Well done. Thank you very much. Great project. And look forward to seeing that sign up. Kia ora. Thanks for coming today. So that brings us then to the second item today is the executive report. Did you want to make some opening comments, Mr. Chief Executive?
No, it's just a summary, Madam Chair, of activity that's taken place over the last 6 weeks that each General Manager will speak briefly to. There are no recommendations other than to receive the report.
Kia ora. Just in terms of the volume of the agenda today, happy to take it as read and answer any questions the Commission may have, except to say that it's busy. COVID continues to provide challenges to many parts of our business, but we adapt on a daily, if not hourly basis to those challenges and just pushing on into the Christmas break. Happy to answer any questions.
So I've got a couple. On page, under community partnerships, so at the long-term plan we put several aside as partners to be treated slightly differently, if you like, on a longer term. I think we were talking a 3-year contract rather than a year by year and that sort of thing. It's just where we're talking the community grant fund. Have they all had to apply into that, or are we dealing with them on a separate basis?
I think it's a bit of both. So we have some existing relationships with groups that we would already call partners that we're moving out of old arrangements into new ones that sit under the community grant fund, and then we'll be looking through the application process to identify other groups that might start to fall within the partner camp versus the one-off grant camp. So we can bring an update on that back to the Commission in the next exec report, or
I think that would be helpful, just to make sure that we are consistent with that we're all on. Yeah, we're all consistent with what we thought we were doing in the long-term plan. I'm just aware the community partnerships are limited to under a certain amount, and some of the partners asked for more than that.
Yeah, correct. It's $50,000,
Yeah.
for a one-off grant, and a good example of a partner is the incubator, which has an amount of over $100,000 per year as a partner with council. So we'll just bring a summary back for your information the next week or so.
Thank you. Just on the work that's happening around Elizabeth Street and the delays to that's still under you, page 30. Just in paragraph 33, the linear park, I take it, is the park, is that the park that's being created outside the farmers' building?
Yeah, there was a plan a long time ago for a linear park that went all the way from Cameron Road through to the other end of Elizabeth Street, above the Strand reclamation, if you like. During the process of approving funding for the Elizabeth Streetscape project, that was reduced to the area between Devonport Road and Grey Street. So when we talk about the linear park outside Farmers, it's that area on the Farmers side of Elizabeth Street between Devonport and Grey.
Right, okay. I just think it might be helpful for people. I know it's difficult with delays and things, but if we know what road closures there are going to be, make that clear to the public over Christmas around that area. And then finally, just congratulations to your Bay Court staff for doing such a great job with so many of those children's events to get them up and running. Kids have missed so much through COVID, and it's great to see that effort being made by our staff to make sure that as much as possible can happen for them.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll pass that on. It's been very busy couple of weeks, in particular with dance schools at the end of the year, and we've got kapahaka tonight. So yeah, the team there are definitely working as hard as possible to enable as much activity to take place as possible, as safely as possible.
Share.
Thanks, Gareth. I've just got a couple of comments and a question. Yeah, just really want to commend the team, I suppose, in terms of the number of initiatives that the community partnerships team and the arts and culture team and everybody is committed to in terms of delivering outcomes for our community. When I did have a chat to a friend of mine who's been in New Zealand for about 10, 12 years and became a recent New Zealand citizen and did attend the planting day down in Carmichael Reserve, and she did make the comment to me that she thought it was a really well-run program, and for her to be able to plant a tree and kind of put some roots down. That was the feedback that she gave to me, that it was a really meaningful kind of ceremony, and particularly for those who were there. So she was there with her children, and her husband passed away actually probably about a month ago, or 2 months ago. So it was a moving experience for her in terms of that initiative. So we were quite keen to participate, but given we're away, hopefully at the next opportunity, we may be able to get along to support those plantings.
And thanks for the feedback. We'd definitely like to thank the Commission because you pushed us hard to get that done as quickly as possible. And I went along myself and I planted a couple of trees, and it was a very cool thing to be a part of. And apologies that we weren't able to line up diaries to get you guys along to the first one. We were absolutely very keen to, but we'll definitely do that for the next one. And Hautapu, member of staff, did a really good job of welcoming people and making the day something that I toku, it was special, so it was great.
And I do have a question. In terms of the places and spaces, during the long-term plan, we had a number of submitters from the Welcome Bay community, and even before, come and talk to us about a number of initiatives in that community, particularly the walkway and the parks and those kinds of things. One of the discussion points that the Commission had was whether we could put on pause, and I think we did put on pause the extension of the walkway around the foreshore around Welcome Bay, and actually engage with the community about how best they would like to see that funding used within their community. So trying to get some community participation or participatory democracy occurring in that community. And I do note in in the report that the council is engaging with the community around parks. So just kind of wanted to get a sense of how that initiative is going in that community, and some of the ideas in that co-design process, what has kind of eventuated through that.
So yeah, correct. We put on hold the Forester Drive extension to the walkway, and there's a plan to communicate broadly with the Welcome Bay community about all of their hopes and aspirations in terms of their parks and public open space. That goes out on Wednesday this week, so I saw the press release at the end of last week. Plan to have the engagement done before Christmas so that we can pick some quick wins and start immediately in the new year. Some easy stuff like picnic tables or seats or an extended walkway, bit of planting, the easy stuff we can do straight away. And then obviously there'll be some stuff that involves a little bit of design or a little bit further consultation, but that'll start, so I'm pretty sure Wednesday this week. And doing it in a way to, as much as possible, try and get as many views from the broader community about, what they're interested in, so we can try and deliver on it as fast as possible.
Is from people highlighting how successful the Project Tauranga initiative has been over time, but like all things, every initiative has its day. But I think it's really important that we don't lose momentum. So I'm just keen to understand what the plan is, or what the thinking is about how we ensure we don't lose momentum and continue to derive the benefits that Project Tauranga has had a legacy of delivering.
Yeah, good question. So we undertook a review of Project Tauranga earlier in the year with the 50-odd partners, and took on board what was working, what wasn't working, and made the decision, a short time ago to wrap up the existing version of Project Tauranga, because it, while delivered some very, very, very good outcomes to the community over an extended period of time, was finding it harder and harder to do that, especially in the current COVID environment. What was identified as part of that review was what our Project Tauranga partners valued the most was the opportunity to connect with the governing body and the executive and the senior leaders within the organisation on a regular basis, to build relationships, talk about things that were going on, and our rough plan, because it still is only a rough plan, is to continue an interaction of that nature. So we've called it a leaders' breakfast for the sake of calling it something in the meantime, but creating an opportunity every 2 months, 3 months, 4 months to get together with key people in the city and the governing body and the senior leaders within the organisation to chat and talk about what's on their minds and what's on our minds. But that's kind of as far as the plan has gone at this point in time. But what our partners did make it relatively clear was that if there's those opportunities to continue to connect with the key people within the organisation, that doesn't mean that their support for great community initiatives will stop. It just might not be under a banner of Project Tauranga. So we don't expect some of them to stop wanting to support the great things that we're doing. We're just going to do it a little bit differently.
Thank you. That sounds good. And, I think of exciting initiatives like the City Centre rebuild and how we could harness that participation to really contribute positively towards that, I think, is a key opportunity for us. Just a query on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council security. There had been a concern raised with some of the commissioners, at least, that the provision of information needed to be seamless through to the new security client, and some of the information had been slow in coming through. I just wanted to make sure that we had resolved that. It was primarily, I think, access to information from the cameras, as I recall.
Yeah, not sure about that one, but can follow up for you.
Thank you. And then my last question was in around Spring Street car park closure for the strengthening, and how we were thinking about the impact on any closure during Christmas or the summer trade.
Yeah, again, apologies, I don't have the most up-to-date information on that project, so I'll find out for you and report that back.
That was all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. That takes us to Nick in infrastructure.
Thank you. In general, I tautoku Gareth's comments just in terms of the big agenda, so I'm happy to take it as read, but I will mention one thing, and that's the Links Ave cul-de-sac that we started as of this morning. So just very, very early indications, of course, but we did see Ocean Beach Road congestion start a little bit earlier, which from a transport operational perspective is a good thing, because it means that people are spreading their travel times out and getting on the road a little bit earlier, knowing that this was going to happen. So we're still to find out whether the congestion was any worse. We just know that it started earlier. So that was one of the interesting observations. And the second one was, unfortunately, we have had a number of vehicles go through the cul-de-sac, which of course is not the intent, so we will follow up with enforcement on that number. So obviously very disappointing to see that people disrespect the intent of keeping people safe and deem their rights to drive the car wherever they like as more important. So a bit disappointing, but we will follow up on that, and hopefully we will see an improvement on that over the next few days.
Thanks, Nick. I was going to raise Links Ave with you. Just in the timing, so in Para 74, you're saying that we'll get a full evaluation of the trial by February, and with options and actions for consideration late February, early March. But I think the community is certainly expecting that they will have, I mean, if the trial is successful and that we can manage that wider traffic network, roading network, that gives us that opportunity to redesign that road space. I'm just a bit concerned that the expectations of the community are that they will have every opportunity to be involved in that redesign, and I'm just a bit worried that we're only leaving ourselves a very short period of time for them to do that.
Yeah, so we're working with them during this trial as well. So we have a hold point halfway through, where we sort of re-engage and do the surveys and gather information right through the trial period. It is compressed, but it has a bit of a history, this one, of course, and there are a number of reasons for this being compressed as it is, but absolutely take that on board, and that is part of the plan, that we engage with the community throughout the process, not just come up with a final report.
Quite a few of the people that have contacted me and other commissioners have some ideas about what that redesigned road space might be. So the best thing we can do is tell them to send those through now rather than wait until the beginning of next year, so that you've got time to have a good look at all of the ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's any feedback like that, we would welcome at the soonest opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. I've just got a question on Marlimi Street in particular, or Te Maunga and Marlimi Street, and just kind of wanting to get a sense of how things are tracking since we've closed Marlimi Street, and how Te Maunga is coping. I do see in the report there is a proposal to upgrade the Te Maunga transfer station, but at the moment, what's the sense of how it's currently operating, given the recent closure of Marlimi Street?
Yeah, so but by all accounts, it's coping really well. The last I heard, which was, so we closed that, it's a few months ago now, and we had very little feedback, so people accepted the fact that it was shifted. I also checked in with Western Bay about the matter, because it being closer to their sort of Omakaroa to Puna, so that's the transfer station that part of the community has been using, and they've had very little feedback as well. So and they are looking at options with transfer stations themselves. So they may be communicating to those communities that there is something being coming up, and closer to home. But as far as we hear, it's working really well.
Sorry, so just on that point, thinking about waste from a sub-regional perspective, it would be useful for us to kind of be involved in some of those conversations with Western Bay if they are thinking about a new facility, given we've got one here in Tauranga that essentially services the whole of the Western Bay. It would be useful for us, I think, to be involved in those conversations along with them if we can.
Take that on board, thank you.
Anything, Stephen? Yep.
We think that people might be able to deal with are the alternative routes, what are the other choices people could make about when and how they travel, to provide people alternative, because that's, part of the trial is to see whether or not we can engender some sort of behaviour change. Yet I think there's an opportunity for us to describe what that might look like, to encourage people to take those initiatives. Because it's very clear that the feedback from the wider motoring community is a sense of frustration. They don't believe that this is going to work and it's going to cause them difficulty. So I think we've got some work to do as a council to both explain why we're doing the trial and then what their choices might be.
Yeah, I take that on board. That it is something that that the transportation team is very conscious of. Communicating not only from a transport movement perspective, but also from a safety perspective. So that's something that, as a community and council, we need to pick up. I think we're a little bit behind in terms of picking up that safety versus movement conversation, which is being had in a lot of other cities around the country, and it's something we're moving towards. And we've kind of nibbled around the edges with this project. With the speed limit changes that we implemented over the last 12 months, and also with the upcoming speed limit review, that will bring those conversations to the surface. But I certainly take that on board. That it's a bigger conversation that needs to be had. Thank you.
That was all. Thank you.
Okay, people and engagement.
Kia ora tātou. I'd also like to take the People and Engagement Update report as read, but highlight one or two points. I'd in particular like to acknowledge our community relations team, who as well as being reasonably new to the organisation, most of them, they have been focused on supporting our business to engage on a significant number of projects between now and Christmas. They have plans to connect more with our communities of place, i.e. Areas of our community that have specific wants and needs, and that will be their priority immediately after Christmas, but we do hope to connect with those groups that we haven't connected with by Christmas. Specific to one of those projects, My Tauranga Vibe, I just want to take this opportunity for the community that are listening, that we do want to hear your views on your ideal future tauranga. There's 2 weeks left to go to fill in your survey. As of today, we've had 1,874 responses, which is excellent, but we want as many as we can get. So please pop onto our website and tell us what you think. I'm happy to take questions.
Kia ora, Susan. Thank you. Just a comment and then a question. well at the tangi, Hui Kākahu's tangi on last week, I did have a conversation with a couple of kaumātua from Huria, and they gave me a bit of an update about early when we came on board. We were aware of a access improvements to the Tiriti block up in Huria, and the trust at that point was seeking some modest support from council to enable that to occur and potentially deliver over 20 odd houses down into that community. And they gave me some feedback that actually the work has been undertaken, and that commitment from council has been received, and they were really thankful. I just wanted to pass that on to the team that that work is now complete, and they're now looking at the delivery of housing onto their land. So just from that modest investment, I think it was less than 100k from what I understand, in order to deliver additional housing, I think is a great outcome. And just a question, thinking about from a human resources point of view, I do know that we are having challenges in the planning and the building services space to recruit people, and I understand that we do have some that are working remotely in other areas of the organisation. Whether there's consideration to bringing on additional resource, and potentially those, so whether it's planners or whether that's, I don't know how difficult it would be for building, for the building services, whether people could, who were looking for to work in maybe coming from a different council, but may be reluctant to move, given the challenges with housing and all those kinds of things. So as a focus for the organisation, whether we have considered bringing people in remotely and giving them the opportunity to live where they currently are.
Great question, Commissioner, and Barbara may want to comment also, but I understand we have explored that option, and in fact we had some Auckland Council staff, I recall last year. Wider in the business, I believe we also had 1 or 2 employees, not even in New Zealand, that were able to perform some work for us for that very reason. Barbara, do you want to comment on your group?
Certainly, Susan, thank you. Yes, certainly acknowledge the staff we had from another council when they were able to share. We do have a couple of staff that are even overseas, so they are processing building consent applications. We've got 1 gentleman in Ireland and 1 in Perth, so we can do that with our technology, but it is still quite focused on depending on what the job is. So.
And if I can just add, Gareth just told me that Nick Lynch-Watson, who dialed into our meeting this morning, was dialing in from Australia.
Stephen, have you got a question for Susan?
Just a comment. It's great to hear the progress with the community relations team, and that the engagement with each of the communities across the city is now kind of accelerating and rolling out. I think that's a really important initiative. When I look back on the report from Gareth and all of the amazing initiatives that are happening across the city, I think the opportunity to use all of our media relationships and our monthly kind of city summary of what's hot and what's not is a great opportunity to tell people about what's happening, because there's some tremendous good news stories there. And I think it's an amazing opportunity to for the population across the city to have a better understanding of actually what's going on. So yeah, commend the initiative, and look forward to hearing all of those good news stories coming through.
Okay, regulatory and compliance, Barbara.
Thank you and good morning. Like the others, I'd just like to comment on three aspects within our section of the report and answer questions. I think when you look at the report, both building and planning numbers are up just about pretty much every month for this year, which, while for us that creates a problem with getting resources, it certainly indicates and supports that development is still continuing and at higher numbers than it has for many years. In relation to animal services, I think it was only probably about 6 or 8 weeks ago, I was saying that we'd had a pretty good year with dog attacks, and then October came along and it's obviously been a bad month. And I want to acknowledge that for everybody involved in a dog attack, it's stressful and it's hard, whether you're the dog owner or the victim, but in particular for the victims. And we had a rather serious one this month that's been well publicised. It's really disappointing. We've tried to support the victim as much as we can, and it will be a prosecution before the courts. On a better note, or a more positive note, we're absolutely thrilled with the IN's report. Any council would be pleased, or any BCA would be pleased with our result, and even more so for a Metro Council. It represents an awful lot of work undertaken by the whole team. Anybody in the team can be subject to a component of the audit. And when I look back 2 years, we're 180 degrees. We got through 2 years ago with the skin of our teeth, and we've now got an excellent result. So extremely proud of the team, and it's hard to stress, I guess. It's hard to describe just how hard that workload is, but yeah, really pleased with them. So happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Barbara. I was going to congratulate you and the team on that result, particularly because the team is under huge pressure. We know that, and doing their very best to not only process what's in front of them, but catch up on the backload. So to get that sort of result is just fantastic in the middle of all that.
Thank you.
The only thing, I didn't do the maths, but your graph on the dogs doesn't actually show the good result. Almost 93% of the known dogs are registered. And that is a pretty darn good result. And again, hard work by the staff. But yeah.
I'm wondering if it's a point of time, because I too looked at that this morning and thought it doesn't seem to pass the smell test, does it?
No,
but
no.
So I did, but we are the statistics that you've got in the paragraph is correct, and I'm
Yeah.
very pleased that they're up to almost 93%.
Yeah, good. Anything else? Stephen?
I'll just echo your comments in terms of well done on the certification. I think it's a great outcome, and just hope we can attract the resources now in such an efficient system that we'll be able to staff up and clear the backlog.
I did actually, when I was speaking at property investors last week, one of them said he had got his permit online and complimented the staff on what a great, and recommended it to people. He said it was just a fantastic experience, and he said, I don't often say that. I've had several run-ins over the years, but I'm happy to pass that on to the team. So it's working. I take it that the Tsunami Awareness Project is the Papamoa project?
Yes, it is, and it's our intention to bring a more detailed report back to the next council meeting.
Great, thank you. Okay, if there's nothing more on that, we move to corporate services. Paul.
Morning, tātou. Just briefly on corporate services, so the operational areas being airport, marine and holiday park, very much a continuation of the story that we've spoken about in previous reports with the impact of COVID and in particular Auckland lockdown. That's really starting to be noticeable on the beachside holiday park numbers with the lack of people being able to get down. Just in terms of the other support services, so finance is very much still working through the annual report and well into the annual plan production for the next financial year. With digital, we've had Cybersecurity Week at the end of October, which was a really good opportunity to raise awareness in this space with quite a lot of turnout. And the other major things in digital is just looking at some transition of all of our old information to new hardware. We've shifted some 109 terabytes, which, to put it in scale, is around about 10 million dictionaries. If you stack them on top of each other, it is 545 kilometres high. So quite a lot of data that's being transferred.
It's a very good visual picture for us. Thank you very much. Most people don't know. What did you say? It was a terabyte? Yeah, most people don't know what they are.
A terabyte, yes, which is
Sounds-
I think
sounds
something
scary.
like 1,000 or 1,000,000 gigabytes, which is. Just like to also introduce a new member of the team. Alistair McNeil is sitting down the back as our new manager of corporate and legal. It started. This is his second week, so just welcome, Alistair.
Thanks very much. Welcome to the team. Okay, so recommendation that we receive the report shared. Oh no, you've got another question? Sorry.
Sorry, I just have a quick question for Paul. Just in terms of the airport and thinking about how we're preparing, or I don't know if it's really a question for us or whether it's an Air New Zealand question, given they're looking at mandatory vaccinations for those travelling. Would we have an understanding of, in terms of modelling, what that might do in terms of the patronage through the facility?
I'd have to look in terms of any detailed modelling, but I can confirm we're working very closely with Air New Zealand in terms of impacts and what it means in terms of the traffic light system for the airport and Air New Zealand and our staff at the airports.
Strategy and growth. Paragraph. They do need a meeting of their own. Okay, so Shad, you happy to move? And Stephen second, we receive the executive report. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried, thank you. That brings us to the Main Street review. And we have Anne coming to talk to us about that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, everybody. Again, in the interest of time, we'll take the report as read, just pointing out a few key themes of the report. Basically, it was about needing a bit more sort of accountability and monitoring and building a better relationship with the main streets. And I mean, the role at the moment is spread across 3-4 different people in terms of managing the relationship. So you'll see that come out in the recommendations. And then there's the review talks about this accountability regime, which sounds a bit fierce, but it's about getting more accountability with our main streets and developing that closer relationship so that we get better outcomes and a better partnership. So yeah, happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Yes, look, I thought it was a really good report, and it addressed a couple of the fears that I had, which I mean, I did have concerns that we're actually taxing people. So this isn't like a community grant that, we're actually rating people to deliver particular outcomes. And I think some of the main streets still don't quite understand that. But I think we can work through that, and I think the suggestion from the report and the recommendation makes a lot of sense. We certainly have heard, as we've been talking with them over the months, their concern that there is no dedicated person that they can go to. I think the comparison with the CCO part-time position is the same. It's the same. They're not the same, and the main streets make that point a number of times. But to have one person in council that they talk to who understands them and has that relationship, as well as our community place-based people, I think will make a big difference to the ongoing relationship, and as we bed this new, more accountable system in, because there will be some discussions along the way. You can see that already. But it's a very good report.
Thank you. I support the recommendation in terms of main streets, and support the comments of Anne and the recommendations of the reviewer. And that, I think from our observations when we first came in, it did kind of need a bit of a reset in terms of the relationship that council has with our main street organisations across the city, not just here but all four. And agree with the recommendations that have been proposed. And I suppose from my perspective, I mean, there are opportunities to create a more efficient relationship. Well, I wouldn't say relationship, but I think there are some efficiencies that could be gained through working smarter, working together across the four Main Street organisations, and that better alignment in terms of the outcomes that council's seeking for our broader community, but also in those Main Street areas. Yeah, and I do, you know, in terms of an approach, support or promote, I suppose, a standardised way of monitoring performance, reporting, and potentially in terms of accounting or those kinds of things. There are some really good opportunities for the Main Street organisations to work collaboratively, I think, along with council. I think those are the points that I just kind of wanted to make, was that there are some positive opportunities, I think, for Main Streets through this process.
Yeah, totally agree with the comments of my fellow commissioners. I do note some of the comments that have come through from Main Street. There's a sense of nervousness around the accountability side of that equation, and in particular the surveying of their members in terms of their performance. And I think that's a really important part of agreeing the outcomes and making sure that everyone's aligned, and then testing whether or not we're actually, between us all, delivering on that. But I think it has to be done in a very positive way, and that the culture around that process is one of identifying opportunities and then working in partnership between the council and the Main Street partners to identify how we can continuously improve, and that should be the culture adopted by the new appointee, not one of a kind of policing, monitoring role, but indeed one of a partnership, proactivity and outcomes focused kind of participation. And I see the other half of the role is going to be very much around the wider relationship with the city leaders and whatnot. So getting the right appointee into that role, I think, is fundamental to success. But well done. I think the recommendations are on the money, and if we can create that proactive culture where everyone is working together, collaborating, identifying best practice, we're going to see a significant lift in outcomes, which is what we're all hoping for.
You happy to move the recommendations? Yep.
Yes, thank you.
Second. So that is that we receive the review and direct staff to implement all 7 review recommendations that are outlined in the report, including the appointment of a 0.5 FTE. Wow, yeah. To manage the ongoing relationship. So moved and seconded, just making sure that doesn't mean that the place-based communications partnership-based staff won't also have contact with them. Yep. Right, all those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 11.4, the Mount Play Centre. I've written down here, Yahoo. Who's going to manage this? Who's talking to this? Ross? No? Gareth?
Happy to have a couple of quick words. This dropped out of the LTP and in a request over an extended period of time for the play centre to be found a home, something that we'd committed to some time ago. We've been busy dotting our I's and crossing our T's, and I think we've come up with a solution at Gulf Road, and we just need to redesignate a piece of that land to support that. I do just need to table that. In the recommendations we asked for it to be 800 square metres. We'd like to put that down as 1,000 just to give us a bit of wiggle room while we work on the final design and how they're going to land in that footprint. So if we could change that one recommendation. Other than that, myself or Ross are here to answer any questions. mainly Ross.
No, I think we've had. I can tell you, attest to the fact that I've had several generations of parents from the play centre awaiting this decision. So it's a good decision. I'm happy to move it with the alteration of 1,000 square metres. You have a second, or you second it and then ask a question? Yep.
Yeah, so just thinking about the reserve itself. So we're looking at changing the status for a portion of it to enable the play centre to operate on that reserve. I assume that this, in terms of the balance of the land, because it's quite a large site, it's just under a hectare. We've got the Bridge Club coming back at some point, and then the play centre being positioned on there. In terms of the long-term use of this reserve and how it fits in strategically across the city, I assume it'll be kind of linked in to that wider piece of work that's going on across the city.
Yeah, so the current users of the site are there's a new build for the regional surf life saving headquarters, and they've partnered up with the Bridge Club to share the facility. So that was a good outcome for the community. 2 community groups using one brand new facility, up to 1,000 square metres for play centre, and then the balance of the site, yes, we'll be considering that as part of the broader network work that we're doing, except to say we've had an initial application or approach from beach volleyball to develop a outdoor beach volleyball centre there. So that's one of the ones that we're looking at initially anyway, but it'll be part of, a variety of pieces of work we've got going on at the moment.
Thank you. And just a question, in terms of timeframes for the change to the reserve status, what are we looking at? Just to give some certainty or clarity for the play centre when they're able to start putting plans in place.
Kia ora. So, post your resolution, I think we need to formally get in touch with the Commissioner. We then go out for public consultation period, which Robin can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's a month that we need to go out for. We then come back to you with the findings of that consultation, make a recommendation to yourselves. That, assuming that you want to go ahead with that, would then trigger the reclassification application, is it? I think we need to go back through the Minister of the Environment. Sorry, I'm going to pass to Robin. She's better on the process than I am.
Yeah, kia ora everyone. So Ross was pretty on the ball there. Yep, out for public notification, engagement with the local community. Then we need to gazette it and give notification. We have delegation, Minister's delegation, to sign it off here at Council. Yep, so once we bring back a report to Council, it'll be part of that process.
Yes, should be early next year, yeah. Part of the reason that we're trying to move quite quickly is that the Play Centre have a positive funding application with the Ministry, but that's time limited. Now, obviously, there's potential to push back on that. But we're obviously trying to make sure that we're providing as supportive an environment for the Play Centre as we can through that process, and to any potential additional funding applications that they may need to make, because they will need a little bit more.
Thanks, Stephen. No. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. That brings us to 11.5, which is the meeting schedule for 2022. Now, I know that Commissioner Wosley had asked if that council meeting on March the 21st could possibly be changed. So have we got an alternate date for that, or are we just making a note?
I have checked whether we could move that date. At the moment we can't. It's time bound because of the actual going out for the submissions and the consultation. We will see if we can, but at this stage we haven't been able to move it.
Sorry, but one of the 4 commissioners cannot make an important council meeting. Surely we can move it into the week beforehand? we can work to the timelines, and I don't think it's appropriate that that meeting only has 3 of the 4 attending.
Yeah, we'll look into that and come back to you. Yeah, we'll do what we can to make it happen.
I mean, I appreciate we've got timelines, but we can always move it into the week beforehand. Surely. Okay, so any other discussion? So these are still indicative, and the public need to know what, I mean, we try wherever we can to stick to them. So with that rider, I think we'll move, but I think we are very, very keen to have start of the annual plan, all commissioners at the meeting. Anything else? Chad?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it would be useful to kind of get, it's useful to get this outlay for the year because it helps me plan my other commitments around that. So, yeah, this is really good. I mean, I do have commitments on Fridays throughout the year because of Te Maro Kaituna, and there's other things dotted through there, which I can make available. But this gives me clear visibility of where I can slot my time, which is useful. Thank you. And I'm happy to move.
Thank you. I think we are trying to move to as much on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday as we possibly can to give those Thursday, Fridays clear. You happy to second, Stephen? Okay. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Item 11.6, emissions reduction plan submission. Jeremy.
Morning all. So this is not the submission. The intent of this paper is to create the key points which will be put into the submission. The submission is due on the 24th, I think it is, of this month. So there's people busy walking around with pens trying to get the right wording sorted out. But the key issue here is that these are the main issues which we intend bringing up through the submission. The reason to bring it here is to see, have we missed anything from your perspective? Have we got something wrong from your perspective? The intention is to write it up with this as the matrix, the framework, and then for the Chief Executive to sign that off sometime before this time next week.
I think we're quite pleased to hear that because there's, as you've laid it out, there's quite a lot of repetition, and we were going to suggest that it sort of be brought together with the main points so we're all on the same page. Good. I don't think you've missed anything. Any questions? Stephen?
Well, just to comment, I think that's absolutely nailed it, because the response to the questions inevitably causes duplication, I think, when you're wanting to address the issues. I think you've covered all of the key points. I would underline really the significance of the change of direction that this emissions reduction program requires of us. And that is a step change at government and local government level. And there's a lot of streams of thinking going on at the moment, but they're not joined up. And I think that's a point, and it is raised already in the submission, but I think that's one that needs to be brought forward quite significantly, because we've got all the RMA reform process, the local government reform process. We've got quite significant change on the horizon in terms of how we raise funds in transportation and the role that road pricing can play, which is vital to enabling a faster shift to alternative modes and better land transport integration and trip reduction. And I'm not sure that the government are fully across this. You don't get the joined up, or any sense that this is a joined up policy direction across government. And I think that's a really critical point that we need to emphasise in our summary document when it's put together.
Yeah, I just kind of want to reiterate those points. And in the draft comments in the papers and the attachment too. Just wanting to get a sense, because there is a bit of a focus on working with treaty partners, iwi and hapu, and are we engaging with the rangapu or others in the preparation of our response to this?
Not in the preparation of the response, no. The plan itself is a plan to have a plan, pretty much. So this is the response to the plan to have a plan. Once central government creates what their plan is, and critically, as Stephen just mentioned, working out what local government's role is within that, then we can take that next step forward as how do we discharge that role in association with our partners as well.
I think the only other point that I want to make this morning is the importance of that measure, because I take your point that this is a plan to have a plan. So it's really critical the criteria that are used then in developing that plan. And that measure around vehicle kilometres travelled to measure emissions is absolutely critical. And for a growing city, it's becoming even more important. So you know, accepting that mode shift will hopefully play or we have to ensure that it plays a significant part in reduction of emissions. So too is the change of types of fuel, and that probably will make a much larger contribution to the reduction in emissions. And so the kilometres travelled just will not capture that at all. So for me, that's quite a critical issue for us, and particularly in a city that's having trouble housing its population. Anything else? All right, so the recommendation is we endorse the key areas of focus for the council's submission, incorporating any amendments, but we haven't made any amendments. We're just agreeing with you that you're going to put it into concise, and then perhaps I think we'd want it, give the rangapu the opportunity to have a look at it. Yep.
Yeah, just another question. So this has gone out, nationally. Are we engaging or talking with our other partners? So whether that's Western Bay or Wakakotahi or others in this conversation?
Yes, Western Bay through a regional initiative, so there'll be a regional submission being pulled together. The regional council's taking the penmanship on that one, but all the local councils are involved in that. And we're also working through with LGNZ and Totuara on their submission, and we've been privy to drafts of that as well. So yeah, there's quite a lot of networking going on within the system. I'm not aware that we specifically talked to the metros. We've done locally, but they'll be influencing the LGNZ one as well. So.
Right, someone prepared to move that? Shared. Stephen second. All those in favour say aye. Against carried. Thank you. City plan review update. Who's talking to this? Christine? Janine? Oh, right. Sorry, I didn't see you there.
Morena tātou. So this agenda item relates to the city plan review. And it's to provide an update. So as we've reported to you in the past, we are required through the Resource Management Act to review our district plan every 10 years. We're coming up to that time now, and we have actually commenced it, and we've done the project planning, and that was all funded, or is funded through the long-term plan. This time around, this review is also requires us to comply with the national planning standards, and that is to bring all council, all district plans and regional plans to have a consistent approach in terms of structure. And then at the start of the year, we've had recently the resource management reforms, which the direction that they're going, which has been recently confirmed this week, that they're still looking to repeal the Resource Management Act and replace it with 3 new pieces of legislation. And a key implication for that on the city plan, the Tauranga city plan, or all district plans, is that the direction is that through the one of the pieces of legislation, there will be the requirement to have a combined plan, and so that combined plan is, for us, will be the Bay of Plenty region. So that's with all the district councils and the regional council. So at that time, the staff have thought about what those implications mean for the city plan review, and today this report is tabling the 3 options that we've considered, and is the recommendation that we should be putting the city plan on hold and really waiting for those resource management reforms to be further progressed and for that new legislation to come out before we proceed. It does not mean drop tools for the city planning team. What it would mean is that we would turn or look at a work program, and we would progress with priority plan changes until we get more certainty through those resource management reforms. And the proposal is that if we were to go through progress with priority plan changes, that we would bring that work program back to council or back to the strategy committee for endorsement. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jane. I support the recommendation, option 3, and I agree this is a kind of a pragmatic approach to quite a challenging reform program that the government's embarked on, and agree that in terms of the work that council started and has done, and the investment that's been made, will be put to use through those priority plan changes. And I'm sure that even through the engagement processes, whether that be with tangata whenua or the development community or wider, that we can still draw on those, draw on their views and perspectives in terms of framing and shaping that. Yeah, it is unfortunate, you know, that at some point, yeah, the RMA does need a refresh, does need a relook, and it just happens to occur right when we need to be reviewing our city plan. So, yeah, do agree that it is a pragmatic approach to the way we're dealing with it.
Yeah, likewise, I agree with the recommendation, happy to support it. Not the least of which is we don't actually even know what a Bay of Plenty region might be. Is it a sub-region? Is it a whole Bay of Plenty? So part of what we need to be thinking about, I think, as we prepare the work that will subsequently go into whatever combined plan is put together, is how our city growth plan melds with the Western Bay's growth plan and indeed the smart growth plan, because it's very clear that we're going to have a we will be scaling up. What's that debate is how far we will be scaling up. And we need to keep an eye on that opportunity, because it may define a complete revision of the growth strategy beyond smart growth if we're talking a larger regional area, which seems to be the sort of direction that is coming from central government right now, rather than the sort of traditional sub-regional thinking that we've had within smart growth. So notwithstanding all of those questions that are yet to be answered, we still need to be as prepared as we possibly can, so the assurance that the work will continue so that we are well prepared to be able to input into the new game in town, I think is critical. And in that vein, happy to hold the plan, but make sure that we're prepared.
Just a couple of comments. So in terms of some of these priority plan changes that need to progress, we are doing some analysis with Kāinga Ora about what might be the most appropriate pathway to move those forwards, and there are a number of opportunities through different legislative frameworks, some that are already in place and some that are proposed to be in place. So we will do that work and report back. And we're also suggesting through here that we would prepare a letter to the Minister, so there's been a letter drafted to provide clear indication that this discussion was underway today. And then once you'd made a decision, we'll prepare a letter that can go to the Minister advising of the final decision that's been made. So
And I assume, I mean, we are working quite closely with Western Bay through this process as well, and I assume they'll be watching us in terms of what our approach is going to be, and then potentially follow our lead in that regard.
Yeah, that's correct. In terms of previous reports that we've brought up, there's been a clear desire from the commissioners that we have alignment with Western Bay. We continue to meet with them on a regular basis, and at this point in time, so they reported up recently and gave the same indications that they are really not going to be proceeding significantly with their full review, and they'll look at priority plan changes as well. And where there's more sub-regional type plan changes or projects, we will continue to work with them and align as much as possible.
All right, someone prepared to move? Shad, Stephen second. So we're putting if that's option 3, we're putting the city plan review on hold pending outcomes of the RMA reforms and progressing with priority plan changes. We'll be notifying our key partners. We've decided to do that, and the staff will prepare a draft work program to be reported to us early next year. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Resource management enabling housing.
I can introduce this, and then Janine and Andy will cover much of the detail. So as you're aware, there was a bill that was introduced to the House on the 19th of October. We weren't aware that it was coming. It has a very short time frame in terms of submissions, so this report was prepared to put on the agenda. Since the report was put on the agenda, we've been doing quite a lot of technical work, engaging with our partners, seeking some further legal advice, which has now been received, and actually started writing the substantive submission. Much of that was done late last week and over the weekend, so we are in a position where we could table the submission, but I'm just conscious that you haven't had any opportunity to see it. Or we could work through the key issues that we want to raise and talk about any of the additional work that's come through and the analysis that's happened over the last, well, probably 4 to 5 days worth of work that's that now leading into what we think we should be raising. I suppose fair to say that we have communicated to central government what the implications of this are for Plan Change 26, and that has created quite a lot of consternation and concern. And we've had some feedback about what could be possible to be introduced into the bill so that Plan Change 26 can continue and we can get delivery of the outcomes that we're seeking. And much of that's been covered in the legal advice. So if you're comfortable, we'll just perhaps the team will work through some of the key issues. And as I say, we are happy to table, but I'm not sure that whether you want to receive that or whether we just take your feedback from the points and then we can offline provide you with the submission, which is due tomorrow. So we're really tight in time frames. It's just such a complex issue with 2.5 weeks to respond.
So I think that the issue we have is we've got to make a submission, and I think we trust that you well understand the issues. That's not a problem. I guess for us the question is whether we make the decision today. The question is, why do we need to make the decision today to delay Plan Change 26 instead of making the submission? And what's the harm in leaving it for a period of time to see what the reaction of Wellington is? And the other thing is that in the item itself, there isn't a clear timeline or a decision-making. It's not clear to me what the dates are, how the dates of the piece of legislation match with our plan change dates, etc. So I think as convoluted as that might sound, that's where our sort of thinking is.
Yeah, I'm happy to cover that, and I agree it's very complicated, and there's a lot of time frames in there. So if it's helpful, I'll step through the bill and the timeframes that's working to, and then work through the implications that that has for Plan Change 26. So in terms, as it's been directed, we had no idea that this was coming. There was no way for council staff to be prepared, and that goes across all Tier 1 councils. So there's been weekly meetings between the Tier 1 councils to understand the implications. The submission is due on tomorrow by midnight, and then all indications are that the bill will be passed by December, by mid-December. So with those timeframes, if the bill continues in its current form, if you have an intensification plan change, so Plan Change 26, housing choice is an example of that. If you have an intensification plan change which is giving effect to the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, you must have your hearing finished, completely finished by the 20th of February next year, 2022. If you have not finished your hearing, you are required under the legislation to withdraw the plan change. So that's the timeframes that we're kind of looking at the moment, and then you come to the implications for Plan Change 26. So
to have that plan change finished by the 20th of February, is that all the appeals finished, the whole lot?
it's just the hearing, but it doesn't give. It means you can't have any adjournments. You actually the hearings panel must be finished their hearings and then preparing their decision on because it's quite common for a plan change of a significant size. It may be adjourned for further information to be provided to the panel. So there's just risk in terms of that.
Our hearings were planned for?
The 8th, 9th and 10th of February. So in terms of Plan Change 26 and the implications of that, so the timeframes that we're working to, so when you have a hearing, you have the hearings panel will provide a direction, and so that direction has been released for Plan Change 26 as well as the other plan changes. And the timeframes for that was the Section 42A, which is the planner's report on the plan change, which is responding to all submissions and further submissions. That was due on the 3rd of December, or is due on the 3rd of December. And then the timeframes from then is that all submitters have an opportunity to read the hearings report, and then they can provide expert evidence if they choose to. So the expert evidence is due on the 17th of December, and that's in preparation for the hearing to be held on the 8th, 9th and 10th of February. So the implications that we have are that in the current form of the bill, it is extremely difficult for Plan Change 26 to be able to progress. Now, the key reasons for that, well, there's quite a few reasons for that. We don't have scope within the submissions that we have received to consider or to bring in to be able to align the plan change with the bill. So a really good example is if a submission's been received that proposes 11 metre height limit, however the bill goes higher than that, it says 11 metres with a 1 metre to include roof design. So however we can't go beyond that. So even if we could, bring some things in through the plan change, we still can't bring the whole bill in terms of the building standards that have been proposed. The other risk is that if we...
That's what's in the bill at the moment, is
that's what's in the bill at the moment.
Plus up to a metre for roof.
Yeah, so there's quite a few. So pretty much all the building standards that have been proposed through the bill, we don't have scope to include within the plan change. They're all slightly different and push things slightly further than how Plan Change 26 and submissions have been received in that matter. That's not to even start on how we would start to deal or consider the infrastructure capacity constraints as well. Secondly, as we were saying, it's an amendment bill. Nothing has been finalised, and so we will not know until mid to end of December what the final bill looks like in terms of what those building standards are, and also what those building standards include. So you'll have a hearings report, which is due on the 3rd of December, which we can't align or even try and align with the amendment bill because that comes out and is released after. So in those two cases, you are in a lose-lose situation in terms of we can't incorporate everything, and even if we could, we don't know what the final bill is going to look like in terms of those building standards. The other concern or risk we have is that the geographic extent of the amendment bill is much far-reaching than Plan Change 26. So the medium density residential standards, so that's the 3 dwellings on a site up to 3 stories, that is to be applied across all residential zones. And while Plan Change 26 does apply to suburban residential, which is our biggest residential zone, it doesn't include zones such as the Wairake residential zone. It also should be including our medium and high rise, so should be looking at the Mount as well in terms of the existing zone. So you've got the complication that Plan Change 26 would cover geographically most of the zones that it needs to, but we would still be required by August next year, 2022, to include or to progress a new plan change that brings in the rest. So you've got a team that's trying to progress one plan change and will need, and quite likely would be working through appeals at that point in time. But they're also required to start a whole new plan change process that would need to align with Plan Change 26 because you want alignment across there, but also with the amendment bill. So the timing becomes really difficult in terms of how we resource this and how we meet the timeframes when you're going to have multiple processes which overlap with each other. So that's where the recommendation is to I suppose when we say hold, it means hold in terms of we wouldn't make that hearing date, but the work is still underway. So we're still, at this point in time, progressing the sections of Plan Change 26 that we have more certainty around and that we know we can get to a place. So a really good example is the transport chapter. We've worked through all the submissions that relate to the transport chapter. We've done all the commercial zones. So we're still progressing all the parts and the provisions for Te Papa, which are increased height. So they're higher than 3 stories, looking at that 6-story, 8-story development. So we're still progressing all the parts that we can, but what this report is seeking is giving us the opportunity to wait for the amendment bill to be passed so we can see what the final content is of that bill, and then provide the opportunity for us to fully consider what those changes are, and then make the decision on what is the best steps or what is the most appropriate next steps for Plan Change 26.
So that's what I'm saying. That would have been helpful to have those dates and that line for us to see. You haven't answered my question yet on why do we have to make the decision today to do that?
I think if you don't make a decision by default, we'll end up we really want to make a conscious decision. So either we carry on working, but the risk is there's a significant amount of work that has no benefit, and that we're taking staff off where they might be able to be better applied, but it's a conscious decision. Or we either proceed and keep aiming for that December date to have the hearings report finished, knowing that a lot of it is likely to be redundant, or we focus our efforts on trying to work with central government and influence the wording of the bill, and that's more where we put our efforts, plus continuing with those parts of Plan Change 26 which are more likely to have value beyond the bill. So, but it's really your call, so we really need some direction. So what we're saying is we think that's a better way to use our resources, is focus on the bits that we know will continue to have value, and then use our resources to engage with central government while we've got the submission ready to go. We think that there's some more work that we can do in terms of actually drafting wording provisions that could be put into the bill, and we can assist because we know the time frame's really short, and work with officials. So we're putting that invitation out to work with officials to influence the wording of the final legislation. Certainly it's on hold, not withdraw, so it's really just sitting there in abeyance until we've got further direction.
I just think that I understand all that, but you still haven't answered my question, which is why do we need to make the decision today, given that we are still trying to work our way through what the dates are, how they match, and then Janine's saying you'll still be doing some work on the pieces of that plan change where you have agreement that you can move forward. Would there be a problem? We've got to endorse the submission today because that's got to go to meet the deadline. If we let this plan, the recommendation A, if we let that decision lie on the table until we've got a more complete picture of the dates and what that might mean, is that going to cause a problem? I think that's more the question.
If I could have just a crack at this, it may be just the semantics around the wording to some extent. I think what we're saying is that in the least, the plan change will be delayed in terms of hearings. We cannot make those hearings dates. We will continue to work on it at the same time that we try and influence the bill to effectively what we want. Ideally we could just carry on with plan change 26 as it is, but what we really want is a pathway between sort of now and when we implement whatever plan change is implemented for developers and public centre, kind of public entities like Kainga Ora to consent intensification developments in the city, terraced housing development and apartments in a way that's actually workable for our governance arm. And so there's a lot of ways that could look in terms of changes to the bill to either allow us to carry on with all or part of the plan change, to giving more weight to things like our partially progressed plan change without actually completing it, or to the bill before it's implemented, or to the NPSUD as it is at the moment to provide a consenting pathway. So we just want to find the most efficient way. We're still having discussions with officials, with our legal advisors around what those options could be, and we haven't even had a chance really together as a team working on this submission to consider that, which we'll do at lunchtime. But yeah, it's certainly not, we're not abandoning this plan change, but we are slowing work on it, continuing work, but it's not going at that same pace, and those hearings dates are the key things that we won't meet. So maybe that messaging's a little clearer.
So don't you really want a recommendation to delay the hearings?
Correct.
Isn't that what you want?
Yes. We're happy to change the wording. So I suppose the key thing from a staff perspective is that we need to, if we're not going to make that early February hearing date, we need to give direction to the hearings panel, to the chair, and the chair needs to release a new direction to say that these dates, and so then we will communicate that with our submitters to say, look, we're not progressing with, those hearing dates will not go ahead, and then they know that the hearings report will not be online on the 3rd of December, and then technical evidence is not due on the 17th of December. So it's providing our submitters or, the plan change process clearly of where we're going and what dates we will or will not meet.
I think that's probably a better recommendation, is to delay the hearings, and you can
some words up, because that's
some words.
Yep, that's fine.
Do you think that's more comfortable with that? Because you've made the case that you can't actually go ahead with those hearings because, for a number of reasons. One, it would have been helpful if we'd had the dates in the report, and then we would have been able to see. But because of the timing of the pieces of legislation, you won't know what the final bill looks like until it's been through the committee of the whole stage and the third reading. Whenever that happens, once it's been through the committee of the whole stage, then you know the changes that have been made, whether the third reading happens in December or in January or whatever. And that doesn't match up with your proposed direction and expert. So you're looking to delay those hearings rather than place the plan change on hold, which I think we're a bit uncomfortable about.
So the words on
Making a
hold
decision.
can probably be replaced with hearings are delayed.
Yeah.
Maybe if we put something that note that the hearings for Plan Change 26 will be deferred with the timing reassessed when the Resource Management Amendment Bill is passed. Are you comfortable with that?
Sounds very good. Did Robin get that? So, having made that, do you then want to take us through your key submission points? Oh, Stephen, are you comfortable with that? Did you have your hand up? Sorry.
Yes, no, I'm very comfortable with that. To me, the issue was, we were almost giving up on the fight before we had it, and there are significant parts of Plan Change 26 that are more enabling, so therefore we want to press a case through our submission to enable that work, all that change to proceed. And so the implication of putting things on hold sort of said that we were just going to abandon all of those upside opportunities, whereas actually what you're talking about is still progressing those and actually putting a really strong case as to why they should proceed. And we put the hearings process on hold because we can't meet the deadlines and requirements of that. So I think this is a much better outcome, very clear what we're seeking to achieve, and what we want to do now is to make sure that we're influencing government decision making as best as possible to get their outcome as well as ours for greater density, particularly in the Te Papa Peninsula. And I would argue actually detuning the emphasis on density where we can't possibly support it with infrastructure, which is the reality. And those, I'm sure, will be the key points that are coming through in the submission. So I look forward to seeing that. But I think, Chair, your recommendation is on the money, exactly what we need to do.
Happy for me to go through the amendment bill itself. To the key, the highlights. Yep. Okay. So in terms of the amendment bill, we've been working quite hurriedly, I suppose, through it because of the tight timeframes, and our thinking has continued to evolve. As been alluded, through this submission, we will also be seeking relief in terms of, particularly in terms of Plan Change 26, how giving some options in terms of what would work best for our council for Plan Change 26 to continue, or to also enable or provide housing supply to be delivered in the short term. So in terms of the amendment bill, it's got 7 key standards, and in terms of those key standards, you can't bring in any more building standards. So from an urban design perspective, it is poor. It's been made quite clear that urban design is not a consideration. And then coming back to Plan Change 26, we have spent a significant amount of time in terms of that architectural testing and bringing in urban design outcomes to make sure that, yes, we want to encourage density and provide for density, but we want these to be good outcomes on the ground. So a really good example is we can't introduce a rule around blank facades, so you can have big, long, blank walls, which we consider to be a poor outcome, how buildings interact or address the street. Also, there's some real confusion around whether things like waste management areas can be included through rules. And so we've seen that and examples of that. It seems quite small, but in terms of an overall layout, when you're increasing density, if you've got nowhere to put your bins, it can be a really poor outcome across the street. So urban design has been is one of the key points in making sure there's clarity in terms of what a building standard is. We're also seeking to put recommendations through what we consider are better building standards. So a lot of these submission points that we've put through have been discussed at length with other Tier 1 councils, and where we we've been trying to align as much as possible. So rather than every council putting in their own recommendation, we've tried to align that to show that we're all willing to work together and come out with the same standards, so which has been really positive. Another one is there's absolutely no consideration of infrastructure capacity. So we've clearly set out within the submission in terms of the significant investment that council has made, and especially around housing supply in areas like Te Papa. It gives us at the moment absolutely no ability to consider infrastructure capacity constraints across the city, and so what that means is that it creates a very ad hoc response, and it takes away the ability for councils to be able to plan for that infrastructure. I think that also comes back to there are clear objectives within the National Policy Statement on Urban Development to have well-planned, cities in terms of infrastructure. That's reflected in our Regional Policy Statement, but the Amendment Bill seems to ignore that completely. It comes down to infrastructure capacity and how we plan for it, and also how we fund it when we've already got a clear LTP in terms of where we're going to concentrate our resources and where our upgrades are going to be undertaken. There's also some limitations, I suppose, in terms of our greenfields. So with the intensification streamline planning process, we have one go. So it says that you can only use that system once, which is limiting. So we're requesting to have more opportunities to use that streamline planning process. But it also, it's questionable in terms of its scope to be able to bring in any greenfield. So at the moment you can bring it in where there's residential zoning, but it doesn't take into consideration any other zonings that you may want to incorporate into a greenfield to support that greenfield. So a really good example is any kind of open space, any commercial zones, conservation zones to protect your significant, ecological areas or areas across river margins. So there's some real questionable in terms of the drafting of, well, you can include greenfield, but you can't include all of your greenfield. So we're seeking clarification and also seeking that you can progress an entire greenfield with all of its zonings across that. The other thing is, I suppose, the undermining of intensification initiatives that we're undertaking across the city. So at the moment, because it applies across all residential zones, it means that this can happen absolutely everywhere. So it creates a blanket approach. It creates a very ad hoc approach to development where you don't know where it's going to happen, which influences infrastructure, but also it undermines our public transport system, which was significantly planned on, and all the amenity as well. So we consider, and that's consistent across the Tier 1 councils, that it takes a very ad hoc approach. There should be more direction on the appropriate location to apply these new standards. It shouldn't be across all your residential zones. The last thing we want is to undermine our higher density areas, such as Te Papa, which we've done a significant amount of planning and investment in the long term. And I suppose one last thing, and Andy might want to include some more, but is the resourcing in terms of how councils are able to resource this work. So you have a group of Tier 1 councils, us significantly included, in terms of we've done a lot of work to implement the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. We've progressed a plan change to a hearing stage. I've been told, there are 10 plan changes across the country which are progressing with this, and with housing type residential plan changes. And for this to come in after the National Policy Statement's been in for a year means that we have to pivot very quickly and make some significant rethink in terms of how we progress with a new plan change, and also how we can progress with Plan Change 26 and keep that moving. There's only so many resources in the planning industry at the moment, and this creates a huge complexity for the Tier 1 councils to be able to continue our work, but also now creates a whole new workload.
Add just a couple of quick points. Key points for me are the timeframes. So just
ridiculous. If you look at the years that we've spent building up Plan Change 26 to get to where we're at, and the level of information that you need to put in a Section 32 report or a Section 42A report, a planner's report, you cannot do this in the time frame that they are suggesting, particularly when it's not simple. It's not just a matter of implementing these new standards. You've got to go through the whole plan change process of considering, you know, everything from the purpose and kind of Section 6 matters in the RMA through to all the NPPS implications, all the RPS implications. You know, are we giving effect to all of those higher order planning documents? It's an impossible task that we cannot achieve in these timeframes. So there needs, in my view, to be some significant change. And also for me, and I don't know whether we want to make comment on this, but the idea is that we're now in an urban growth partnership with the government. And it's, you know, I don't think a partnership really should work in this type of manner where something as significant as this comes, you know, out of absolutely nowhere at a critical point in our current planning process. So to me, those are just additional points.
Yeah, so we're seeking, so I suppose our submission as it currently worded is much softer than some of the others that we've seen around the country, which are far more direct and aggressive, and it's whether even that soft touch on those elements is something you're comfortable with, or you'd want that removed. And so it's probably one where we need some political guidance on.
I think we're going to encourage them to work with us to ensure that the aspirations of Plan Change 26 are achieved through some adjustment to the current drafting.
And that absolutely is core to the submission, and we're putting suggestions on how that should be. So I think probably compared to some of the other councils, we're far more in that space, but whether you just want to make some small reference to the partnership or not, that's really something that guidance would be helpful on.
For me, I always took more notice of people that were trying to be constructive than were having a go. I don't know. Offer to work in partnership, which means that we both take account of what the other one's doing. You can do it quite subtly. So, have you heard enough? Yep.
Just in terms of our submission, are we, and I assume would legal have a look over it, and I suppose I'm just wanting to get a sense, are we suggesting any potential changes to the bill? Examples of where things might be improved to kind of deliver the things that we're seeking?
Yes, so in terms of, we've had numerous conversations with legal in terms of fully understanding the implications of Plan Change 26 was kind of our first step. And now we've started to move in with the legal team in terms of what are the relevant sections or what are the relevant pathways that we can recommend through our submission. So while we haven't sought particular wording changes, we've identified the parts that I suppose those implications are and suggested different pathways in terms of how we can proceed with Plan Change 26, how we can continue to consider, resource consents and for those to have a weight, and other mechanisms that are already within the Resource Management Act, such as Section 55, which means that where there's a mandatory requirement, you don't need to go through a Schedule 1 process. So we've suggested a couple of different pathways and then sought that where we would like to work with central government in terms of the particular wording changes that could be made to the bill to be able to, I suppose, provide direction where we're seeking direction or clarity, and also a number of different pathways to be able to progress our work.
The only question I have is in your notes in the agenda item. And paragraph 13 has the key submission points. The thing that worries me is what is, to me, the most important difference between what we were trying to do and what the government has overridden is the second to last one, where the amendment bill incentivises low-scale intensification in areas where we were looking to intensify at a much greater rate, and yet you've got that right down the bottom.
I can assure you it's up the top. It's so how the submission is laid out is that from this, I suppose, longer list, we have a slightly shorter list which we've put at the up front, and we've included, short paragraphs to really make it clear in terms of those key concerns, being Plan Change 26, undermining density requirements and infrastructure capacity. Those sit up the front, and then the second half of the submission sets out a table which goes into a lot more detail in terms of all the different concerns that council has.
Sorry, just another question. Are we working closely with officials through this? In terms of our thoughts or?
that the hearings for Plan Change 26 Housing Choice will be deferred with the timing reassessed when the Resource Management, Enabling Housing and Other Matters Amendment Bill is passed.
And then endorse the key submissions
And then, yeah,
points.
and endorse key submissions, yeah.
Do you want to be that definite about the bill passed? Because by the end of the, what if they get to the end of the whole of committee stage at the end of this year? They can't change the bill after that, other than you know, the legalese, and they don't get the third reading done until next year. You'll know at that stage what's in the bill.
Or reassess when the content
Yeah.
of the bill
I
is.
just think you need to give yourself a little bit of wriggle room in case their house program doesn't quite work.
Yeah, the reason why we're saying that is the message that we've received is that it will be passed by Christmas. So, but you're right. Or maybe we say it will be reassessed when there is more certainty on the content.
On the contents of the bill, yep. Yep, that gives you a bit of wriggle room.
Actually, with the moment we've got with the timing, we could just see and be reassessed, so that it's not only timing, because you actually might end up withdrawing or modifying in full or apart. So maybe just change with it.
Will be deferred.
With a reassessment when there is more certainty.
Yeah.
So will be deferred with a reassessment when there is more certainty. Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Then you've got that there. Just keep going. Yeah, that's it. Yep.
That's it. That's better.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm happy to move those two. And Stephen, second. You will give us a copy of the submission.
Absolutely, yes. We'll give you a copy of the submission and we'll get you the letter, a draft letter for your consideration to be sent to the relevant ministers.
Okay, all those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Janine. And Andy? Draft parking. Alistair and Peter.
Good afternoon all. So I'll just briefly introduce and then Peter will just take you through some of the submissions. So you'll be familiar with the draft parking strategy. In August you resolved for us to go out to public consultation subject to some amendments which the committee asked us to make prior to that consultation. Those amendments were made to the draft strategy. We ran a consultation exercise over September and early October. 21 pieces of feedback were received. Those pieces of feedback have been now considered by the team and have resulted in some changes to the draft strategy now attached to the agenda. Peter, did you want to just take us through that feedback and then we can round out with next steps?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Alistair. I'll take the report as read, but just wanting to point out a few important items. And you're already familiar with the draft parking strategy following our presentation in August. I think it's important to note that parking isn't a goal on its own, as I also explained in August, but it can help to contribute to vibrant centres, multimodal outcomes, the compact urban form. You know these 5 objectives. This direction is also supported by UFTI, the NPS on urban development, the street design guide, and Waka Kotahi's parking management guidance. And all these documents strongly encourage councils to manage parking supply and demand in a consistent way, and thus developing the city-wide parking strategy. Managing supply and demand is all about managing in such a way there's availability, and the international benchmark is that 85% of the existing spaces, and you manage it in such a way through pricing and time limits that there is availability for those people who want to arrive at that very point in time. If you do that right, then it's easy for people to get a parking space. It can also, if the occupancy is often over 90%, over 85 or 90%. It's getting harder, but on the other hand, it also works the opposite. If it's much lower than 85%, it means that our restrictions are a bit too tight and it makes it harder for people to find a space. And other objectives could be turnover and things like that. So this is a graduated approach, and the strategy highlights the 3 principles which are worth to note. That it's integrated, it's incremental and responsive, because parking management isn't set in stone. As new shops open, the city develops and changes and things like that. Then the consultation process. Alistair already mentioned this. Following our previous meeting in August, we made some minor changes to the strategy based on the points you've raised, and we consulted with the community shortly after. The consultation period has been open for 1 month, and to make sure that people were aware of it, we have approached a group of key stakeholders, and we have asked the community to provide feedback, which we shared on the website, on our social media channels like Facebook and LinkedIn. We have received 23 written submissions, and we've had 2 further meetings for people who wanted to have a meeting. And there were some common themes in the feedback that we received. 2 areas came up often: the city centre and the area near the historic village and the hospital, for example. Many submissions noted that they wanted the council to act quickly with implementation. But there were also a few concerns, for example, about that a graduate approach was really required to avoid very disruptive effects. Also, although it was noted that change will be sometimes inevitable, but it was highlighted that very clear and good communication about the future consultation process, about the parking management plans, and eventually about proposed changes is very important. One of the meetings I wanted to point out is the meeting with the Waikato University. They really stressed the importance of a parking strategy, because currently some lectures that students follow are 3 hours, and they realize that the 2-hour time limit that we have in the city centre doesn't always work for them. Also, in the vicinity there could be parking available further down in the residential streets, but it also fills up quite quickly, and they find it increasingly hard to find a space. They also stressed the importance to act quickly, given that the new students will arrive in February. Based on those submissions, we made some amendments, which are highlighted in yellow in the draft strategy, and that's a document that is now in front of us, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. So I've got a couple of questions, and I'm interested in the Waikato University, because that was really part of where I was coming from. So I am living out in Papamoa, and I drive in every day, and I was aware that the regional council were changing their bus services from Papamoa, and that there was no longer a hub change. They were going to have an express bus. So over the weekend I got in my letterbox the little outline of their routes and found it doesn't go down my road, it doesn't go down Papamoa Beach Road at all. If I want to catch the bus, I've got to go into Farm Street and catch from the, where we're going to put the intercity interchange in Farm Street. So that, when I had a look at the parking strategy, then I'm thinking from the consumer's point of view, if we want to get people using public transport, how is our parking strategy then interlinking with that? Because where do I park in Farm Street? I end up parking in a residential street to hop on a bus to go into the city. And then our residential streets get filled up, which is just what the Waikato University is saying. So people get further and further out into residential streets, which we're also narrowing to try and control parking there. So I guess what I didn't find in the parking strategy is that integration with public transport, and thinking about it from the user's point of view, not just coming into a city centre and trying to find a park, but if we are definitely looking for mode shift, how are we linking that? And then my second question is, obviously this is the overall strategy, and we're then going to do these PMPs, and I assume that the first one cab off the rank is going to be the city centre, and probably the second one's going to be Mount Maunganui, and then there might be one around the hospital. What does that timeline look like?
Can I respond to the first question, if I may? So the need for that integrated and responsive approach is acknowledged in the draft strategy. In section 7, we touch on that there particularly, talking about an integrated, incremental and responsive approach, and I think there's a second bullet point there which talks about that need to ensure that when there's a change in the system, whether that's the transport system or the urban development system, then we need to understand the role that parking management and the parking strategy could play in supporting the outcomes that those other changes are delivering.
Your language then is so obtuse that I read that. I could see you're talking about integrated and incremental, but I didn't pick up that that means we have to think about what I've just outlined.
Okay, yeah. Perhaps we could take that away as action from this and just look to make that somewhat clearer. I think there's a second point to the point you've raised, and I guess UFD and the TSP in particular have identified that issue with, we haven't got a system response in place for the community at the moment. One of those key business cases is that combined public transport services and infrastructure business case that's being scoped at the moment and to be delivered over the next year. That will look at things like the need for park and ride to support some of the facilities that are provided, whether that is looking at a park and ride type facility in the Arataki area. I'm not sure. That sort of hasn't sort of met some of the criteria we've looked at in the past for enabling park and ride facilities. Typically they're located further from centres, but it's not to say we can't sort of do a little bit more work around that to see how that Arataki facility might or might not support some other, I guess, infrastructure to make sure it's successful.
Okay, if I can answer the second question then, in terms of the timing. So that's correct. We start with a CBD, and then there are other areas like the Mountain Grit, and that will follow on from that. And we have had a commitment to revisit that in terms of the current parking regulations by February. We're struggling to meet that now, and it is actually COVID related. The supplier, professional services supplier we're wanting to work with on this is based in Auckland, and it's been pretty clunky and tricky for us to get anything underway there. So we will have to come back to you with an updated timeline. Now, I can't say that we won't meet the February deadline, but by the day it's looking challenging. So I can come back with a more definitive updated timeline on that.
Do I take it then in 7, you're going to do a bit of jiggling with your wording? I mean, you don't even mention park and ride anywhere. So it would just be helpful if it was a bit clearer that... Oh, no, sorry, not 7. Sorry, I was not...
7.9 refers to park and ride.
Yeah, so park and ride has a specific section to itself later in the strategy. I guess the intent of that earlier sort of introductory section in section 7, it's just to talk about that wider issue or higher level issue of the need to understand the role of parking, supporting outcomes.
Yeah, it's that second bullet point. Well, you're sort of using bureaucratic.
Would you just like us to clarify by providing some specific examples so that it translates into real terms, so we can
language.
Yep, we can add in some specific examples to explain what we're talking about there.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I guess my concern with the strategy is that it kind of looks at the world through a parking lens, and it doesn't really look at the world through a user lens when people are making decisions about how and when they're going to travel, and this is where the integration of the whole system is key. And I think that's the missing piece in the discussion. It kind of goes immediately to the detail. And just by way of example, I was interested in looking through the list of key stakeholders approached, and there's no one there from a road user perspective. AA would have been a logical party to engage and kind of start from that user customer experience, and then how the parking strategy can reinforce the wider transport objectives we're trying to achieve. That's the missing piece, and you can see it in the submissions, particularly from the sustainability group, that they're really struggling to understand how this all fits together. I know it's complex, and there's a danger that you go too high level, but if it's not framed right in the first instance, then people get upset about what we're trying to achieve and why. So I do think that modification in the strategy is really important. Just in terms of one aspect of detail, I think incremental pricing is a much better way of describing rather than exponential pricing, which sounds very threatening. And just my observation from Auckland experience with all of these parking initiatives, it's amazing how adaptive motorists can be to provisions. So as parking was tightened in the city, more and more people started parking on the fringe and then catching the bus into the city for the last block, or increasingly more and more residents. So initially it was Ponsonby and Parnell, but it then expanded the next ring out, and you ended up with a sort of a ripple effect where people who live in those communities can no longer park outside their house because it's been occupied by a worker in the city who is actually doing their bit by catching public transport for the last leg and think they're doing a fantastic job, but actually creating a whole bunch of wider unintended consequences. So I think we need to be very aware of that, and that's why the kind of reframing it from a user perspective and demonstrating that there are other viable options for them, such as park and ride, or indeed, some of the initiatives we're taking about Carless Wednesdays, that, think about your trip and is there an option? This is all part of an integrated whole. That's my high level observations.
Okay, so I think what we're saying is we want a few changes to the draft. Do you... so we can adopt, so the recommendation is to adopt as amended and make the amendments that we've suggested. Or do you want it to come back, Stephen?
No, I think the staff have picked up on the sentiment, and I'm happy for those changes to be made without it coming back. But I do think it's important that we frame it correctly.
So we're happy to pick up the flavour of this, and even if we sort of draft a couple of paragraphs, and Stephen in particular has raised some questions, we can just send those revised paragraphs just informally to Stephen to check he's comfortable. And then if you pass this resolution, subject to those amendments, we'll get this finalised.
So we'd adopt, under C, we'd adopt the parking strategy as amended in response to submissions received, attachment 3.
And feedback from this meeting.
Yeah.
And then we'll work.
I think we all want to see the amendments, not just Stephen.
We're happy to circulate them, so we'll just send you probably the new paragraphs rather than send you the whole document.
Yeah, don't need the whole thing.
And then you give us feedback on those.
And just to tuck away, I think we do need to have some. I mean, I'm just thinking of the bus interchange conversations that are happening. I do think we need to think about that wider integration, not just a place for buses, but how do we then provide with the people that we want to, which is CBD and Arataki. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, I've got to put the motion, don't I? Yes. Okay, so moved by Shad, seconded by Stephen, as we have on the board. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. No late items. Should we go into committee now and then we'll break for lunch? And then, yeah, okay. So can I have a mover and seconder to go into public excluded for the reasons outlined in the document? Shad and Stephen. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. We will adjourn until, it's just on 1 o'clock, isn't it? Yeah, we'll come back at 1:45. Thank you. Thanks, Alistair.